Tower. For some of you, that name alone already has your palms sweating with your mind racing to the tune of its iconic soundtrack. For others though, it might just sound like some knockoff Pizza Hut. To bring everyone up to speed, Pizza Tower is a recently released spiritual successor to Wario Land and has received critical praise for its art, sound, and gameplay. It's taken the internet by storm and has forever changed the gaming landscape as we know it, only further cementing the recent idea that games by indie devs are just objectively better than those by most AAA devs. In this video, I decided to recreate Pizza Tower in 3D, but that task is easier said than done. This video is by far my biggest yet, so if you end up enjoying the video, consider subscribing and liking the video as it helps me out tremendously. I, just like everyone else I know, have recently started playing Pizza Tower. I mean, the first impressions of this game are amazing. How can't you feel fucking enchanted by this intro, man? I mean, this shit is just so awe-inspiring. I mean, it really makes you feel like a fictitious pizza store owner. After only playing a few hours, I got the brilliant idea to recreate this game in 3D. I knew the journey would be hard, but if there's anything that I just learned from our protagonist Peppino Spaghetti here, yes, that's his real name, is that sometimes you just gotta climb that pizza tower, with the pizza tower being making the game and I guess me being being Peppino. I'm not really good at metaphors. I decided that I would undertake this challenge during my 1-week March break and set that as my unofficial deadline for this project. The first thing I did to kickstart this project was downloading the newly released Godot 4, since after all, Godot is my main engine of choice, and I figured that this game would be a perfect opportunity to try out the brand new update to the engine. I decided that for this 3D reimagining, I would create a 3D platformer set in third person so that you could still see Peppino's animations, since that's a really big allure of the base game. My beginnings were humble, with the first thing done being following a really handy tutorial by AJ08 Coder, to which I followed to set up the basics of this 3D platformer. I eventually got the movement working, but the player would randomly stop. The solution was easy enough to find since I quickly found out I had the inputs mapped incorrectly. I really hope I don't run into any other issues with the input maps. I mean, that would just be awful. I really hope I don't have that in the future. After working hard for about an hour, I called it quits and decided that I would pick it back up in the morning. The next day, I decided to basically plan out my game by using a finite state machine, which is basically just a little system that controls a player's states, i.e. dictating how a player can switch between being on the ground, griddying, being in the air, that type of stuff. In that vein, I followed a tutorial by GD Quest to set up a finite state machine since I pretty much had zero idea what I was doing. It was at this point that I did one of my favorite things of being a programmer: borrowing code. I'm just gonna click copy and paste here. Okay, so when I copied the code over, there were some errors because the tutorial was originally written for Godot 3.5, and like I said, the Godot version I'm using is 4.0. I eventually fixed all the bugs after some trial and error, and by trial and error, I mean sort of just changing and deleting lines of code until everything seemingly worked. So after setting up the state machine, I grabbed a cup of coffee, played some music, and started working on the code. After a while, I ran into a weird bug where the player would just freeze in the air or on the ground suddenly, which really bamboozled me. I mean, I seriously did not know what was going on. I cannot emphasize how much this bug annoyed me. Like, I was genuinely raging at how much this was impeding my progress. That is when I remembered something crucial. Just last night, I remembered the bug I had with the input map and thought long and hard. I realized that when I created the input maps, I basically told Godot that it could accept movement from key presses or controller analog inputs. What I didn't realize was that since I was using my keyboard and I still had my controller plugged in, it presumably picked up some stick drift from the controller, causing those weird sudden movement errors. When I unplugged my controller and play tested it again, it worked perfectly fine, thus confirming my theory. Although I'm annoyed the issue was as simple as unplugging a USB, I'm relieved that it wasn't something to do with the finite state machine that I was depending so dearly on. After that little hiccup, I began working on the other states. What's neat about the state machine that I'm using is that it's very modular in the sense that I could just create new scripts and little packs that would work separately from everything else, so it was really just useful for managing the code base. Anyways, I started working on one of the key features of Pizza Tower: the player's speed. One of the key themes of Pizza Tower is being fast and keeping momentum, especially towards the end of a level. To accomplish this, a player would hold down the run button while speeding through 3 states. The first state is called Mach 1. This is when the player initially starts speeding up, and it really doesn't last that long. The next state is Mach 2, and this is what you'll see most of the time while playing the game, and it's just a much faster version of the player while also being able to bulldoze enemies and break through walls. The next state, as you guessed it, is Mach 3. Mach 3 is literally the same as Mach 2, except you move faster and there's a different animation and slightly different sound effect. What's interesting is another state, state, which, unlike the previously aforementioned states, has nothing to do with movement and is just Peppino breakdancing. I ended up implementing Mach 1 through 3 and made sure to include that starting from walking to Mach 1, the player would accelerate, and that while jumping in Mach 2 to 3, you keep your speed. Basically just exactly mimicking what was done in Pizza Tower. I also quickly added a coyote timer and jump buffer, which, if you remember from my game jam video, link in the top right, are just things that make the platforming more fair. A coyote timer makes it so that you can jump while you're slightly off the edge, and a jump buffer makes it so you don't have to perfectly time the jump button when landing. What I learned to appreciate when remaking Pizza Tower is that I can sort of just look at what's done in the base game and ignore having to do any crucial critical thinking on my own. Basically, I can just excuse my own laziness. The next day I decided to map out all the states that I would actually be adding to this remake. In the original Pizza Tower, Peppino has a lot of moves, like a ton. To list some, he has a jump, body slam, dash, Mach 1, Mach 2, Mach 3, roll, wall run, dive drop, super jump, grab, giant swing, spinning pile driver, belly slide, rising uppercut, taunt, parry, breakdance, and plenty of other transformations that are unique to each level. I knew that unless I wanted my inner demons to win, I would have to limit the scope of this project, especially if I were to do it in the 1 week time limit. I decided to cut out all the attack moves and some of the more niche moves, which unfortunately includes the breakdance, which makes it a very sad day for all Peppino breakdance lovers around the world. This still was a lot to handle, but at least now I knew what I was getting into. I created some arrows to show how states could be traversed, but honestly the visuals are a lot more complicated than what I actually had to program. Now I could talk about the grueling journey about programming all these states and features, but I think it would be more fun to just pick some of the best highlights while I was actually creating the game. The air state. The idle state.
You chillin'.
Walking. The dash. Mach 1.
Bro.
Mach 2.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mach 3. The body slam. The super jump. The uppercut. The wall running.
Okay, that's gonna come in clutch.
Down. And the wall jump.
Not exactly what I was planning.
So after a couple of days, I managed to create the states. Little did I know that I would not be actually done with them until the very end. The process of making the states was not very fun, and my code very much resembled spaghetti even after using the managed state machine. Which, I mean, like, begs the question of what it would have looked like if I didn't end up using that state machine. I mean, that really saved a lot of headache in the end. What's most interesting, however, during this whole state making was that I managed to hallucinate an entire state. For some reason, I had the brilliant idea that a player could run down walls, but that didn't actually exist in the base game. I genuinely, and this is not a bit, I actually don't know how I hallucinated that. I guess I just thought it would be a feature in the base game. I spent a considerable amount of time adding this into the game, which I'll include was not easy to do because I had to create checks for if there is a wall beneath the player and if you're falling at the right speed and if you're... I'm getting ahead of myself. It was not easy to say the least. Honestly, I'm just impressed I was able to completely hallucinate it. I'm not going to remove it because, like I said, it plays well and it's a fun mechanic and there's no point in just removing it, but it's still strange to say the least. Something that was bugging me for the longest time in this remake was how the player would snap back and forth while speeding up in Mach 1 and transitioning to Mach 2. The fix was basically just giving the player inertia, especially more prevalent at the higher speeds and Machs the player was traveling at. What I did was use my amazing vector knowledge to basically just check the direction that the player was going versus the direction they were actually moving in. Basically, all the math just checked if the direction was opposite to the player's movement, which would cause the player to slow down a bit before moving in that direction. Similarly, I just tweaked the movement for various differences between the direction and velocity. Basically, I was on some nerd shit, but it became worth it because the movement became way smoother. At this point, with most of my states done, I decided to use my handy dandy whiteboard, which is right over there, to plan out the rest of my activities throughout the week. This is what the whiteboard originally looked like. Here you can see Wednesday is kind of empty, and that's because I was planning on hanging out with friends that day, so I knew I wouldn't have much time. Honestly though, I should have ditched them because, oh boy, I sure love losing my sanity while coding. Picking apart my code only to find out that I have a fucking controller plugged in, causing me eternal suffering comparable to the 7 circles of Spoiler alert, I did not really follow that whiteboard that well. This is what the schedule really looked like after I came back. I was really tired on Thursday, so I basically didn't do anything, which was okay because I had Sunday and Saturday reserved for bug fixes and some minor tweaking. Next on my bucket list was creating the model for my 3D Peppino. To be 100% candid, I am awful at art and modeling, and to be honest, the first time I picked up Blender was for the thumbnail of this video. Luckily, I found a really amazing Peppino model on Sketchfab by this person, who I'm not gonna try to pronounce their name because I'll probably end up butchering it, with this model using the Creative Commons license, so it's okay to use for my game. I ended up importing it, and now instead of a white bean, I just had a T-pose Peppino, which I guess is progress. I did, however, end up getting sidetracked, so instead of working on the animations, I just continued fixing some bugs and working on the movement. Eventually, however, I got to working on the animation. Surprise, surprise, I had never really done anything like that before again, so to avoid further agony, I used a really convenient service called Mixamo, not sponsored. Basically, you just upload your model here and Adobe software generates an animation for you. I had to fiddle with uploading it for a long time because for some reason the model that I was using in Mixamo didn't work and like Peppino was reversed or something, so it was really annoying and I kind of wasted a lot of time, but I ended up getting it done eventually. I ended up with these amazing animations, which yep, they are one of the animations ever. I understand these aren't the best, but I have to work with what I've got, especially during this 1 week time limit. I then added these into the game along with sound effects to the best of my ability, and yeah, it's definitely implemented. They're definitely expressive, which is what I was going for since the original animations are so, well, animated. I think it's funny the animations are broken, and personally, I think it adds to the charm and gives it that quirky pizza tower-ness, especially this animation. The next task up was creating the level. Basically, the original pizza tower levels are all linear, which makes sense since once you reach the end, you destroy this guy called Pillar John and the level starts falling apart. After doing this, an escape sequence starts and you have to race back to the beginning, all while the amazing soundtrack starts blasting. I figured that there were two approaches to making a 3D level. I could be really cheap and just rotate the 2D level on its axis and recreate a linear level in 3D, or I could create a custom-made 3D level that makes more sense for platformers. See, the problem with ingenuity and a unique 3D level is that it takes effort, something that I was losing by the day as I continued this project. Ultimately, I also decided to go for the linear level just because it would make more sense for the whole like rushing back after taking out Pillar John, since I wasn't really sure how I would accomplish that in 3D if the player could just jump around the obstacles. I created a mock-up of the level in 2D and decided that I would create the level in such a way that it would utilize all the different mechanics that I ended up creating for the game. Those being the jump, wall run, wall down, wall jump, dash, super jump, slam, uppercut double jump, and the 3 mock stages. Finally ending the level with my own Pillar John. I started prototyping the level using Godot's CSG obstacles, alongside a tiled prototype texture that I downloaded from this site, link in the description if you need it. What I noticed was that while using CSG boxes, Godot would frequently crash, especially when scaling or moving them. I know that the CSG boxes and obstacles were not designed to create an entire level, but I figured that the prototype I was making wasn't that big enough that the game would start crashing. Regardless of the crashing, I continued. I eventually ran into a problem, however, when I scaled the CSG box very long since I wanted the player to reach Mach 3 on it. What I realized was that every time I tried interacting with that large CSG box, the engine would crash. This was unironically the only time I actually got frustrated while working with Godot until suddenly I couldn't open my project. I started to genuinely freak out. Like at this point, I was worried that I had lost everything I was working on. If all my progress was lost, I would implode. I hadn't backed up my project in a while on GitHub, so I was basically in panic.exe. I eventually just opened the project on Windows File Explorer and manually re-imported everything to a new project, which was annoying but spared my progress nonetheless. I'd essentially made zero progress in like the 4 hours I spent making the level, which really annoyed me, but at the very least, I still had the project. The original plan was to prototype it in Godot, export it and finish it in Blender, and then re-import it back into Godot. Again, I'm not very good in Blender, so the whole process of making the level is very cumbersome and annoying, but I got it done, to say the least. I applaud everyone who enjoys modeling and art because that stuff is not easy, especially since these cool checkered textures I made didn't work in Godot, only making me more frustrated with the entire art making pipeline. I had to rename each object in Blender with -cols so they would have a collider texture, and eventually my level was in Godot and working. I then wrangled with those tile textures, and after some tweaking with the world environment and lighting, I had a decent looking level. Finally, the pieces fell into place and I had a couple of last steps. After some off-camera bug fixing, since it wasn't really that interesting, I quickly created the Pillar John feature alongside a timer, the main menu, and a win and lose screen. I also lowered the resolution and upscaled it in order to create a quick pixelated effect that matched the sprite work of the original game. I also drafted a really quick free play mode, even though I doubt anyone will actually play this game. More on that in a bit. My brother ended up playing the game to give me some valuable feedback, which I used to tweak some mechanics and some bug fixes, and eventually the game was done. Now, what you've all been waiting for, the reveal of the 3D Pizza Tower game I made. Enjoy. So here we are playing Pizza Tower 3D. You can see my very amazing logo that I made in like 5 seconds, and I'm just gonna be playing the game. All right, let's play. So not to dawdle too much, you know, we got some pretty awesome stuff here. Let's just play. So we're gonna run up this wall, and I'm just gonna play like a regular player, not like I've meticulously planned this level for hours. We're just gonna run down the wall. Uh-oh, we missed the jump. That's so awful. So you could just start running over here, but that's really slow. You know what I'm saying? So what we're gonna do is we're going to do the dash ability to gain speed. There we go. Now we're gonna jump. Gonna hit that wall, but now we've made it. Very cool. Next obstacle here, we have a little jump. So, you know, you jump up, but oh no, you can't reach. So what are you gonna do? You're gonna uppercut, boom. Pretty awesome. Now you're gonna run down here, just all normally, and you're gonna speed up for a bit. And if you listen closely, you'll hear Mach 3. So I just triggered it off because I ran away. But so now when we go back over here, we're gonna hold down the super jump button, release. And there we go. We're gonna hit our head, but that's okay. And now we're here. So now here's Pillar John. You can see in his beauty, here he is with this very simple texture. So we're just gonna break it and start pizza time. So we got only 30 seconds. So we're just gonna ground pound and we're gonna run back to level. So really you don't need 30 seconds, but I just gave that just in case. We're gonna run back, bypass everything here, and boom. So there we go. I won in 20.434 seconds. Very epic. And we're going to go back and we're going to try out free play. So, I mean, free play, really not much going on here. But just in case I wanted to add it, I just thought it'd be fun. Because it's pretty fun to do the super jump, for example. And you can just fly around and whatnot. And yeah, you can run around. Very, very cool. And if I get to Mach 3 and do a super jump, I go even further. Then I can ground pound. There you go. And if I ever decide to accidentally fall off the map, there's no worry because look at that. And I'm back. Okay, I was actually kind of worried it wouldn't work there. So there we go. That's the whole game. It's very short, more like a demo to be honest, but yeah, there you go. The game runs pretty well, but for some reason, there's one bug that completely eludes me. Basically, when the player runs into a wall, there's a chance they quote-unquote win the game in 0.000 seconds, so I guess if you're speedrunning the game, you need to pray for this glitch. I am going to be posting the code in my GitHub link in the description so everyone can use it, so if you end up finding a fix for the bug, post it there and I'll probably just implement it. In the meantime, if you ever end up encountering it, just ignore it and continue playing the level as usual. So will I release the game? No, probably not. I don't think that legally I can anyways, since the title is literally called Pizza Tower 3D and uses their logo, and all the sound effects and music are just ripped straight from the game itself. What I will do is after this video is uploaded, I will email the devs and send them this video and ask if I can upload the game for free among anything else they desire. If the game ever gets released, I will update the description with my itch.io page. If you want to keep up to date, follow my Discord and Twitter since I'll be regularly providing updates there. Overall though, even though this project caused me some pain, it was really fun to say the least, because since it was my first time making a 3D game and it was my first time using Godot 4, I was pleasantly surprised with the whole thing. I mean, after all, some of the enjoyment in game dev is the crunch time, unless I'm a masochist, that is. Although I wouldn't really call this that much of a game since it's basically just a demo and the whole level is like 30 seconds long, but you know what, let's just call it a game. After this game though, I need a break. I'm probably gonna get back to playing Pizza Tower since I only started making this video right after finishing the first floor. After all, this video ate up all my free time during spring break. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed, consider subscribing, liking the video, and turning on notifications as it helps me out tremendously. It's been Frogish. See ya guys later.